In the summer of 1997, on July 1st, a neighbor who resided in Oakland, California, named Monica, heard a knock on her door. As she answered, it was a woman pleading for help. Monica immediately recognized the woman as one of the Allman sisters that lived nearby, but due to visible burns, she could not determine which sister it was. Regardless, Monica wanted to help as she could tell the woman was distraught. The lady told Monica that someone threw something in her window that caused a fire to break out in her home. When firefighters arrived, the woman's house was already engulfed in flames. The woman told police that she was 52-year-old Stevie Allman, who owned the home that was now burned to the ground. When asked what happened, Stevie claimed that drug dealers who were wearing black hoodies surrounded her home and threw Molotov cocktails through the window. She believed this attack was intentional, claiming she recently had started a crusade against drugs and crime in the area, where she had intentions to turn people into authorities. Now, according to Stevie, she started filming dope deals and prostitution in an attempt to put an end to these crimes in her area. This is when the men she had filmed started to threaten her. Stevie also stated to police that her sister, 47-year-old Sarah Mitchell, recently lived with her, but had moved out and fled to Nevada with her boyfriend, as she was starting to feel unsafe because of the threats. Now, when police asked Stevie for her sister Sarah's contact information to verify this whole drug dealer story, Stevie stated her address book had burned in the fire. While in the hospital recovering from her injuries, authorities visited Stevie as they needed to know more information regarding the drug dealers she claimed to have burned down her home. On one end, because they needed to find the people responsible and hold them accountable, but on the other end, this story of drug dealers attacking a woman spread across Oakland, which caused concern and anger. The hospital even came out with a statement on Stevie's behalf, basically stating that she attempted to protect her community and urged residents to not allow crime to destroy their city. And this statement reached national news to the point where she actually received a call from the White House. With this now media attention, Stevie started receiving donations that included monetary gifts. It was as if there was this community forming around her that wanted to help in any way that they could. The governor of California at the time even offered a $50,000 reward for any information on the people responsible for the arson attack. Reasonably so, there was also significant pressure on authorities to solve this case because to the public, there's criminals on the loose that just burned a lady's house down. And I don't know about you, but I would feel very uneasy if this happened in the city I'm living in. The first step for police was to start questioning drug dealers in the area, but everyone they spoke to not only denied having any information on the fire, but also seemed to be confused when asked about the videos. Police found their behavior very odd due to the high reward on the line, but they also had an honest but cold opinion on the matter. If the Allman sisters were a problem for them, then a bullet in the head would have been a much easier solution versus a fire that may or may not have taken out their intended target. Yikes, but I mean, it is a valid point, I guess. At this point, detectives thought to go ahead and take another look at the arson report. One major inconsistency had to do with the house being firebombed, because it was found that the broken glass was actually found outside of the house window, not inside, hinting at the fact that this does not corroborate with someone throwing a firebomb inside the home. But here's when things really start to get strange. One of Stevie's sisters, Leota, had recently filed a missing persons report for Stevie. But wait a minute, Stevie is in the hospital recovering from her injuries, which does not make sense at all as to why she would file a missing persons report. Reasonably so, police questioned Leota as to why she would file this report. Well, it turns out it wasn't actually Stevie in the hospital. It was in fact her sister Sarah. This is the case of Stevie Allman. Hi everyone, welcome back to True Crime List with me, Alyssa. If you are new, welcome, glad you could join. So what a twist in this case, right? I mean, up until now, everyone was believing that Stevie was the one who came running out of a burning house and who was recuperating from these injuries. But no, it was never even Stevie. I mean, I am aware that there are people out there that use false identities, but the extreme that Sarah went to literally try and become her sister is just beyond insane to me, and there are many more details that we need to unpack, so let's continue. Stevie was born and raised in California to her parents Lucille and Omer, where she grew up with 7 siblings in the same house that had burned down. When her father left the family, Stevie took on this role of helping her mother take care of her younger siblings. She did have one older sibling, Leota, but as the second oldest, she felt it was her duty to care for the younger children. Stevie was deeply loved by those around her and was known to be hardworking, who also dedicated a lot of time and money to caring for her family. During the 1970s, the other siblings left the home, but Stevie stayed with her mother where she would start working for a local family business. The family of this business adored Stevie so much they gave her a bonus upwards of $100,000 after she worked for them for 20 years. And this was their way of thanking Stevie for the dedication she had to the company. Now, growing up and even in later years, Stevie and her sister Sarah would always get mistaken for one another as they looked similar. I mean, they were only 5 years apart, so relatively close in age, I would say. But opposed to Stevie, Sarah was essentially her opposite, where she was known to be unstable and she refused to get a job and work or really even build a career. And by the time Sarah was 30, she was struggling. She was divorced, had 3 young kids. So being the sweet and loving person Stevie was, she took Sarah in. Eventually, Sarah would meet a man and move in with him, but that relationship did not last very long, and Sarah found herself living back with Stevie and her mother, and this kind of seemed to be a reoccurring act that Sarah would do. She would find a guy, move in with him, and then always end up back at Stevie and her mother's house. Now, I will say that Sarah would take care of the home while Stevie worked, where she would cook and clean and take care of their mother. So not really contributing financially, but would at least help out with chores. Eventually, Sarah's kids would move out, and in 1994, their mother would pass away, leaving the house to her children. Since Stevie had lived there all her life, she wanted to keep the home, so she bought out the other children, basically paying her siblings for their shares of the house, where she became the sole owner of the home. Yet, she would still let Sarah live there with her. So now it's in the 1990s, and residents in Oakland, California were struggling with the rapid crime rates. It was starting to become a more dangerous place to live with its rise of drug trafficking, gang activity, and violent crimes. This is when the local police department asked civilians for help on cracking down these criminals that were progressively taking over the neighborhoods. This is when Stevie or Sarah or both of them started videotaping drug dealers and sex workers on the streets and then turning the footage over to law enforcement in an alleged attempt to get these criminals off the streets. Now, it's unclear which sister, Stevie or Sarah, was the one playing neighborhood crusader, because some sources would state it was Stevie and others would say it was Sarah, as again they looked very similar. The sisters' misidentification was about to explode in the most terrible way possible, where Sarah would take Stevie's identity after their home burnt down. So when Stevie's sister Leota revealed that it was actually Sarah who was in the hospital, she revealed to police that Stevie would have never filmed criminals in the area, as Stevie was very reserved and would never act as a police informant. Leota would end up getting a call from Sarah in the hospital, where Sarah claimed she had good reason to impersonate Stevie. So according to Sarah, the reasoning for this was because she didn't have any medical insurance and Stevie did. So by using her identity, Stevie's insurance would pay for her medical bills, or at least some portion of it. This conversation with her sister left Leota with a bad feeling in her stomach that something was not right, where she became increasingly concerned on Stevie's well-being. This is when Leota begged Sarah to tell her where Stevie was, and this is when Sarah stated she was in Lake Tahoe, but then later stated she was in Reno, Nevada, and this caused major alarm bells to go off with Leota, where she would actually confront Sarah about her inconsistencies in her story, where Sarah would then just hang up on Leota. So this is what led Leota to filing the missing persons report for her sister Stevie. Leota knew tensions were rising between Stevie and Sarah, as Stevie was simply frustrated that Sarah did not work, was lazy, and had this expectation that Stevie was just going to take care of her the rest of her life. Also, Stevie was even considering moving out of Oakland, which left Sarah to be concerned about what would happen to her. But Stevie was on the brink of retirement and wanted to move on with her life, and made it clear to Sarah that she was not going to take care of her forever. After Leota had spoken to police about all this information she had, police went back to the hospital to start questioning Sarah, but when they arrived, they were informed that Sarah had been released earlier that day. However, an APB would locate Sarah in a hotel in a city that was right next to Oakland. So when police started interrogating Sarah, she was still claiming that she was Stevie. In fact, when authorities confronted her about the conversation she had with Leota, her response was, no, Leota has cognitive issues and she was just hysterical that night. I mean, I like to assume that family members know who is who in their family. Like, come on, Sarah, nice try. But of course, police asked for identification, where Sarah proceeded to take out her wallet, where investigators saw multiple IDs both for Stevie and Sarah. As the interrogation was really not going anywhere, police decided to take her fingerprints, which came back that it was indeed Sarah that was sitting in front of them. Police were actually able to identify it was Sarah because her fingerprints were already in the system from a former prostitution charge. This led to Sarah's arrest for forgery and providing a false name to police. So now that Sarah's identity has been confirmed, the next question is, where is the real Stevie Allman? One way investigators tried to track her down was by looking into her bank accounts, as this can potentially identify her location, possible travel plans, or even identify financial irregularities. But when police looked into Stevie's bank accounts, they had been emptied. Now, luckily, banks have surveillance cameras typically inside and around the building, so when police took a look at the footage, it was very clear that it was actually Sarah who went to the bank and cleared out the accounts. With no luck on tracking Stevie through her bank activity, authorities went back to her house that was burnt down to see if there were any clues about where she would have gone. Despite the damage from the fire, there were still some items that had survived the flames, including a freezer that was in the kitchen. As they opened it up, they found an elbow sticking out of a garbage bag. Immediately they knew it was a female's body, but they had to get confirmation from the coroner on who exactly it was. The autopsy revealed that the body parts found were that of Stevie Allman, and as you can imagine, this immediately sparked foul play. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head, where Stevie had taken a minimum of 20 blows to the head with a crowbar or similar object. Police then went back to Stevie's residence, where they used a chemical called luminol that is commonly used to find bloodstains. And when they got to Stevie's bedroom, this chemical lit up a gruesome scene. There was bloodstains found all over her room, which made it likely that Sarah attacked Stevie while she was sleeping. When detectives got to the bathroom, there was evidence of saw marks on the bathroom tub, and this led to the conclusion that Stevie was dragged into the bathroom where she was then dismembered. On July 23rd in 1997, Sarah was formally charged with the murder of her sister, Stevie Allman. Sarah's trial began in November of 2000, so almost 3.5 years after Sarah's arrest. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Sarah killed her sister in an attempt to steal her funds. And in the beginning of this video, I had mentioned that Stevie was considering moving out of Oakland, and this had Sarah worried that she would have to maybe start working and provide for herself. And look, I get it. I'm sitting here thinking a lot of people have to work to make a living, right? But almost all of Sarah's life, she was dependent on her sister. And the possibility that she would have to go on and be independent probably freaked her out. But by no means is this an excuse to off your sister and steal her identity. Just want to be clear on that. So during the trial, it was believed that on June 30th, 1997, Sarah quietly entered Stevie's room where she proceeded to hit her over the head over and over again until Stevie was no longer alive. This is when Sarah dragged Stevie into the bathroom and began cutting her into pieces. While Sarah was under the identity of Stevie, she received around $3,600 in sympathy checks, which is disgusting to me given that she was the one who started this whole facade with the murder, the fire, and the impersonation. And I don't mean disgusting when it comes to the people that were contributing financially to help her. I'm talking about Sarah, the one that accepted this money knowing what she did. Sarah also forged her sister's name on financial documents a few days before Stevie was last seen alive and took around $17,000. Prosecutors also pointed out that Sarah had the motive to murder her sister so she could gain access to the deed of the home and receive payments that Stevie was receiving from a previous job. Now, prosecutors were worried that the jury would not be able to believe a woman could ever do this to her sister, but they heavily focused on the physical evidence and claimed that Sarah intentionally burned the house down to ensure that freezer would burn to bits. But thankfully that did not happen. On November 21st of 2000, Sarah was found guilty of first-degree murder, which was a crime punishable by the death penalty. Yet, the jury recommended life without parole, which was different with prosecutors' request of the death penalty. When it came time to her sentencing, her family asked that she be spared the death penalty, as taking the life of another sister would be, quote, a stab in the heart. So I'm not sure if the family had an impact on the judge's decision, but Sarah would ultimately be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, basically agreeing with the jury. Although Stevie and Sarah's sister Leota endured great pain from this case, she did state that even though she tried to stop loving Sarah for what she did, she simply could not because she doesn't want to bury another sister. But let's not forget that Stevie's life, impact, and story matter. So that is it for today's case. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and please stay safe out there.